So today I want to talk about two questions, and the first one's going to be really short. The second one's going to take me a little bit longer. But how many of you have ever asked yourself this question: what is God's will for my life? Lots of us, right, have probably at one point asked ourselves that question. There's actually several people in this room that have asked me that question: Mark, how do I know what God's will is for my life? And I think that question is actually, from my perspective, a pretty simple question to answer. I think God makes it pretty clear, kind of what His will is for our life. Let's look at a couple verses really quick on the front end out of Matthew. This is out of the Message translation. It says, "Teacher," they're talking to Jesus, "which command in God's law is the most important?" Jesus said, "Love the Lord your God with all your passion and prayer and intelligence. This is the most important, the first on any list, but there is a second to set us alongside of it. Love others as well as you love yourself." So ultimately, I think when we ask ourselves that question, what is God's will for my life? I think it's pretty simple. I think God's will for our life is that we love Him and that we love people. And sometimes what happens is people confuse, I think, a lot of other things that go on in our life, and they kind of put them in the category of that question where maybe they don't need to, that really it's love God and love people. And if I do that, I am living out God's will for my life. So that's the first question. That took like 2 minutes. You guys, we're going to be out of here fast. So there's a second question that is more challenging to answer, and that's really what I want to talk about this morning. And that question is this: what is it that God has uniquely created me to do? What has God uniquely created you to do? This is a much maybe more challenging question to answer, and really what I'm going to spend the bulk of my time today talking about. How do you know, how do you find out what it is that God has uniquely created you to do? And there's three foundations that I kind of want to build on this morning, three kind of pillars to that question of how do I find out what it is that God has uniquely created me to do. Foundation number one is this: you are created uniquely by God. That word uniquely, you guys, is so important. You are created uniquely by God. Unique means you are the only one, being the only one. And God had you in His mind when He knit you together. There's a verse in Psalm that you probably all have read before, Psalm 139:13, that says, "You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb." See, God formed you. He created you. He created you unique with a few things that I'm going to talk about this morning. But I love that word in that verse, that He knit you together. Now, those of you that don't know my wife very well, I'm going to give you a little glimpse into my world with my beautiful bride. She has a nickname, and her nickname is Stitch Mama. This woman can take, is it called a skein or a skein? What's this? A skein of yarn. They come in the mail all of the time. And she's got this machine that winds them all together. And then she can make these incredible things wherever. You guys, I take her fishing, and she is knitting on the back of the boat. When we're in the car, she's knitting. Now, she says it's so that she doesn't panic because of my driving. But she has this incredible ability to take this yarn that comes. By the way, there's an entire wing of our house that's dedicated to her yarn, just so that you know. Jesus, help me. It's awesome, sweetheart. But she can take this yarn and a pattern and create sweaters and scarves and amazing creations. And when I was thinking about that verse, that he knit me together and he knit you together, he did it with unique fabric and unique colors and unique pattern for your life in terms of creating. Oh, God, the universe, the God of the universe knit you together. That's really the first and most important foundation this morning. Second foundation is this, is that you were born for a specific purpose on earth. You were born for a specific purpose. Let's look at a verse in Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 2 says this, "For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things He planned for us long ago." There is a unique purpose that God has for you here on this earth. I think that's a really powerful foundation. Let me point to a verse in Jeremiah. This is Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 10. It says, "I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart, and I appointed you as my prophet to the nations." When God created us, I really believe that there is a specific thing that God had in mind when He created all of the things about who you are. Foundation number 3 is this: you will get more fulfillment out of life if you are living out who God has called you to be. And this sometimes where I think people get a little bit confused between that first question, what is God's will for my life? And the second question, what it is that God has uniquely created me to do. Because here's the reality. You can do one thing or another thing in this life, and God is no less pleased or loving of you. His grace is as big in your life, no matter what you choose to do with your time while you're here. But we will get a lot more fulfillment if we live out the calling about how God has uniquely created us to be. So those are our 3 foundations. John 10:10 says this. It says that the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have life to the full. I think when we live out who God has called us to be, that we get to have life to the full. We get to enjoy our life more. We get to live out of everything that God put inside of us, and our days will be certainly much more enjoyable if we get to experience what God has ultimately created us to do. So how do we discover, how do I know what it is that God has uniquely created me to do? How do I know? How do I find out what it is that God has uniquely created me to do? First one is this. There's a couple points here. The first one is I think we need to spend some energy to discover who you are. It takes a little bit of an investment in some time and some thinking power and maybe a little bit of reading of some things and getting some feedback from some people to ultimately discover who I am. And God created us with a couple things that He gave us. When He knit us together, when He knit you together, there's a couple things that He gave you. He gave you a personality. Some of us might need to wake our personality up a little bit. Some people need to tone our personality down a little bit, right? But he gave us a personality. I'm extroverted. Surprise, right? I get energy being around people. So I've learned, man, I need to be in environments where I am around people because that's how God has uniquely created me to be. You have a specific personality on purpose. You have a specific personality on purpose. There's a reason why you have the personality that you do. The second thing that God gave us is He gave us spiritual gifts. There are things that supernaturally God has equipped you to be able to do in spiritual gifts. Like I have a couple spiritual gifts. I have a spiritual gift of being an apostle. which means I love launching. I love change. I love, those kinds of things would be kind of in that spiritual gift of being an apostle. I have leadership gifts. I have, my biggest gifts is I'm an encourager. That's why I have a tattoo on my arm that says, be encouraged, for crying out loud, right? So we need to find out, you guys, what are our spiritual gifts? What's our personality? By the way, Jensen Dessa already mentioned this, but Next Steps is coming up. If you've never been to Next Steps, one of the most important, you're going to find out about why we do church the way we do and the story of Radius and where we're headed. But one of the most important parts, I think, of Next Steps is week number 1. Guess what you get to find out? Your personality. There's this whole assessment that you get to take, that you get to find out, what is my personality? On week number 2, we find out what our spiritual gifts are. You go through a spiritual gift assessment, and then it even shows you at the end, hey, if you have these particular spiritual gifts, here would be some things that would really maximize who you are. Here's some things that you could do with the spiritual gift that you have. So guys, I implore you, come to Next Steps and learn more about yourself. It doesn't, we can't find out about how God created us without putting a little bit of effort and a little bit of time and a little bit of energy into discovering those things. Ken will be back for Next Steps, and he's really excited. You guys, there's some incredible things that are about ready to happen for this church that Ken is going to be sharing at Next Steps, so I can tell you, don't miss it. So God gave us a unique personality on purpose. He gave us spiritual gifts. He also gave us talents. He gave us things that we are naturally good at. One of the things that I would encourage you to do, if you have talents, invest in your talents. If there's things that you love doing and you have an affinity for them and you're good at them, spend resources and invest time and money to become even better at those talents, because you have those talents for a reason. God placed those things inside of you. Let's look at a verse out of Romans. Romans chapter number 12, 6 through 8 says this: in His grace, God has given us different gifts for doing certain things well. So if God has given you the ability to prophesy, speak out with as much faith as God has given you. If your gift is serving others, serve them well. If you are a teacher, teach well. If your gift is to encourage others, be encouraging. I love that. If it is giving, give generously. If God has given you leadership ability, take the responsibility seriously. And if you have a gift for showing kindness to others, do it gladly. God placed things inside of you, gifts. And when we live out those gifts, we get a lot more joy out of this life. I think I have a slide there, Jake, that kind of shows this is my best attempt, and Jake helped me out of creating a pie graft in church, for crying out loud, right? He gave us a personality and spiritual gifts and talents. So, second thing I want to talk about with this is we need to look at what our interests and desires are. So for me to discover what it is that God has created me to do, I'm going to spend some energy to discover who I am. The second thing is to look at your interests and desires. Psalm 37 verse 4 says this: take delight in the Lord, and He will give you your heart's desires. I think if there's things that are burning inside of you that you think about, then you ponder about them all the time, and they're things that kind of fire you up inside. You guys, look at what those things are. Spend some time saying, God, what is that desire? Where is that coming? And here's one of the things that I think I've learned a little bit. Like when the first time I remember reading that verse when I was young, I'm like, oh man, I'm going to get rich. Because like we think that's what my desire is, right? Like we start thinking those terms. But here's what happens. I think the closer we come to know Jesus, it's that He begins to place desires inside of us. And our desires begin to shift and begin to change. But I think that throughout life, it's really important to think through, God, what is it that You have placed inside of me? What are the things that make my heart begin to soar? And what are those desires? And where are they from? And how might you use those things in other people's lives? Number 3 is this: ask yourself this question: where is my sweet spot? Where's my sweet spot? You see, I think what happens is if we can spend some time and our energy and we learn what our personality is and our spiritual gifts, we look at where our talents are, and then we start overlaying where our desires fall on that specific place would be your sweet spot. When you find your sweet spot, I have a feeling you will find yourself getting really excited about life and really exploring, God, what is it that you could do through that? How could I live in that particular sweet spot? So a couple of really practical things for you to do this morning. Number one is go to Next Steps. Simply go to Next Steps and spend some time and some energy learning more about who you are and how God has specifically wired you. Second thing to do is to be intentional about giving yourself space to be quiet and listen. I don't know if you guys are like me. I mean, I'm sure there's a few of you in here. I do not like being quiet and listening. It's actually really hard for me. Slowing myself down enough to listen is, for me, is really hard work. It's a challenge for me. Like I have to be very intentional about putting myself in an environment, turning certain things off around in my world so that I can actually slow down and listen. A few months ago, Ken and I had been talking for a while about some ideas that I'm going to share with you this morning, and you guys, by nature, I'm an action taker. I'm a ready, set, let's go. Don't fill in all the details. Show me the baby. Don't tell me about the birthing pains. That's like let's just go already, right? And Ken asked me to read a book, and you guys, I'm not a reader. If it doesn't have pictures that I can color in, I probably am not going to read it very often, right? But Ken said, Mark, I'm going to challenge you as your friend and as your pastor. I've got a book that I want you to read. And some of you may have read it. It's called The Ruthless Elimination? Yeah, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. You guys, we live in a time where our lives are so packed and so fast and so filled with information all day long, 24/7, that to take some time to slow down and actually listen, man, that's important. One of the things that I've learned in my walk with God is most often when I feel like I hear His voice, is that He whispers to me. I don't like it. I wish He would just use a 2x4. But there's something about a whisper, though, that's really powerful. A whisper speaks to intimacy. You have to be close, and you have to not be talking in order to hear a whisper, right? So friends, be intentional about creating some space in your life to just slow down and listen and say, God, I think I understand what my personality and my spiritual gifts and my talents, and I think I know some desires. God, what would you have me do with those things? God, what are you saying to me through how you want me to live my life and who you want me to be? Next thought is this. When you have a sense of what God has uniquely created you for, well, then what? Well, I think there's a couple tests that it has to pass. I think it needs to pass the goosebump test. In other words, when you figure out, God, I think you've uniquely created me to do this thing, does it make you soar a little bit? Does it maybe keep you up a little bit at night because you're excited about it? Do you begin to think about ideas? Does it give you goosebumps? Does it kind of generate passion and enthusiasm inside of you? I think it needs to pass the goosebump test. I think it also needs to pass the peace test. So even though it may be something new and a big change in your life, do you have a great sense of, man, I'm just at peace. Like I really feel a sense of confidence that this is what God has uniquely created me to do. Does it pass the wise counsel test? The people who are closest to you, that know you the best, your life group, your closest friends, the people that know the dark sides of what you go through in life, the people who have earned your trust. Like one of the things I'm going to share about the journey that Susan and I have been through is in the last few months is my inner circle. I have kept up to date, like almost every couple days. What do you think of this? Here's some things that are happening. Here's doors that God has opened. What do you see? Because I want it to pass the wise counsel test. So I'm not just off doing whatever it is that I randomly think about, right? The last test I think it needs to pass is the crazy test. In other words, is that thing that God has uniquely created you to do, does it stretch you? Is it beyond what you naturally feel like I can actually go and do and accomplish? Does it pass the crazy test? So let me share with you some big things that have been happening in our life and ultimately some changes that are going to happen around here that are really exciting. So the last few months, I've been going through this journey and been really wrestling with, God, what is it that you have uniquely created me to do? And what call do you have on my life? And through this journey, Susan and I, my wife, have had a lot of conversations, a lot of dialogue about what does this mean? And I read that book, and I was spending time actually journaling for a little bit, which is like, I don't even know how to do it, right? But I started writing out some ideas. And then Susan and I got invited to a weekend away with a couple here locally that was going to get a small group of people together for 2.5 days to just discover what dreams do you have. And it was a couple days where Susan and I, that's really all we talked about for a couple days. We went away to their place, and it was, what dreams do you have, and what dreams do I have, and what might God be doing? And then we would talk about it with this group of people and get some feedback. And through that journey of that last couple days, some things really started to crystallize for us. And then about 2 days after that retreat, God came with a 2x4 and opened a door in a really significant way. So the last couple of years, you guys, I have had a growing passion and heart for pastors. The role of a pastor, you guys, is very challenging. And we come here and we interact with Ken and get to listen to him preach and see what God is doing around here. And sometimes, even for me, sometimes it's hard to really understand what that role really is. But the role of a pastor, you guys, is very, very significant and very challenging. A pastor wears a lot of hats. Like, obviously, they wear a preaching hat, right? And I don't know if you guys know what this is like. I told Ken, I said, dude, I don't know how you do it. Because when you preach, you guys, it's kind of like you had to get pregnant, and then you had to give birth, and then you got to get pregnant again on Monday morning because you're giving birth again on Sunday, right? My daughter Jessica is here, pregnant with our first grandbabies, twins, getting ready to have birth. But I told Kim, man, I said, man, I think you probably have preaching stretch marks. It's like, but you have this hat of preaching consistently that a pastor does. A pastor obviously gives leadership. They wear that hat. A pastor sometimes wears almost like a therapist hat, right? So many times people want to come to a pastor and say, here's all the things that are going on in my life, and what do you think? And what thoughts do you have for my life? And what should I do this or should I do that, right? They often wear that hat. Often a pastor wears this hat of organizing a lot of different things. Obviously, there's times where a pastor has to step in when the Mexican restaurant catches fire and has to figure out how are we going to still do church on Sunday, right? A pastor, you guys, wears so many hats. one of the things that I've learned about pastors, many pastors, is that a lot of pastors feel like they almost have to pretend that they have it all together. Because if they share what's going on in their life, and it's a false belief, by the way, I think, but a lot of pastors think they have to kind of put this image out there that everything in life is going great, and it at times can be a very, very lonely place. Now, let me tell you some really good news about the pastor of this church, Ken Hubbard, my dear friend. We are blessed. You guys, honestly, I truly believe that we have one of the best pastors in the country pastoring this church. And Ken is doing amazing. You guys, Ken is extremely healthy. He is very purposeful about putting things in his life around his marriage and around his family and how he lives on a day in and day out basis to really guard and protect how he's doing, because it's really important how he's doing, right? So we are very blessed to have a very strong and a very healthy pastor who has elders who check in with him, and he has overseers from around the country that he can call and get feedback. And Ken, you guys, is really doing great, and he loves this church. But not every church is blessed to have a pastor that's doing as well as Ken is doing. You guys, there is an epidemic happening right now in pastors across this country. I want to share a couple statistics with you. 38% of pastors this last year, 38%, said that they have seriously considered leaving ministry. So think about that when you drive around town. That's over a third of the churches. 38% are seriously considering leaving ministry. And even more scary to me statistic is this. 51% of pastors who are 45 years of age or younger in this last year have seriously considered leaving ministry. I mean, imagine that. Many of them probably just went to seminary, went to college, got their degree, got into a position at a church, and already are feeling the weight and the pressure that they're wondering, is this really what I should be doing with my life? For the past couple years, Ken and I have been talking about what would it look like if we partnered and did retreats for pastors. And so we started talking probably 2 or 2.5 years ago. What would this look like? How could we do this? And what could a retreat be? And what shouldn't it be? And I remember Pastor Tommy, who was here a few weeks ago, one of his famous statements that he says is find a need and fill it. Well, for the last couple years, since kind of Ken and I have been talking, God has been working behind the scenes in the lives of some other people who have had this same desire to simply come alongside pastors and encourage them and see them be refreshed, pour life into them. And so we are launching a new ministry to pastors. It is going to be, I'm super excited about it. And one of the things, you guys, that I feel so blessed by is Radius Church, because of your faithfulness in giving. Ken has already said, you're coming along for the ride with us, and that's going to be incredible. So we're launching this new organization. This will actually mean that I won't be on staff at Radius anymore, and I'll kind of walk you through what the timeline on a couple things are. But let me give you a verse out of Jeremiah. This is the theme verse for this new ministry. Jeremiah 31:25 says, I'll refresh their tired bodies and I'll restore tired souls. One of the things that I'm convinced of is that most pastors don't need to go to another conference or another convention. They just need a place where they can kind of take a time out for a few days with a few other pastors and have a blast. And be in an environment where if they're going through some things in their life, where there is space that they can actually let their guard down and talk about things that they are going through. We want to pour encouragement into them and see God refresh and revive pastors. Our mission is this. Our mission is to help refresh and renew pastors so they can shepherd the local church. So we're going to do this in 3 ways. We're going to do it, first of all, through epic retreats. I love that word. Epic retreats. And these retreats are going to be in some amazing venues. Susan and I leave on July the 11th, 2 weeks from tomorrow, babe. Holy macanole. And we are headed to Sitka, Alaska. I think I've got some pictures of where we will be. This is a 2-acre island just outside of Sitka with an 80-foot dock, and we've got a couple boats, and the fish cleaning station is down here. I'm looking forward to that. We already have 3 pastor retreats coming up in August and the beginning of September. I am super excited about that. We have more that are on the way. Our plan is we're going to be up there until the end of September, and then we're coming back. So you'll see us again the end of September. And then in the fall and the winter, we'll be here, and then we'll be gone for a week, and then we'll be here and gone a week. And we are doing the retreats at a place in Tonasket. It's like the Ponderosa, for crying out loud. When we went and looked at this, I was told Suze, I said, I don't know if I'm Little Joe or Hoss, but 2,800-acre ranch, 8,000 square foot building, and pastors from around the country are going to have a chance to come in for a handful of days, and somebody might shoot something someday, I don't know, we'll see, but snowmobiles and ATVs, and again, just to put a pastor in an environment where God can do what only God can do and pour some life into them. So we're going to do epic retreats. We're going to do something else called mini sabbaticals. Maybe there's a pastor that just needs 10 days or 2 weeks alone. Maybe they just need to take a time out and just sleep as long as they want, take naps during the day, do some reading, and just completely get away from what they're dealing with on a daily basis. So we're going to be offering mini sabbaticals, and then we're also going to be offering and putting together some pastor vacations. You guys, most pastors, so that you know, most pastors don't make a lot of money. And most pastors don't have the ability to go on a nice vacation someplace. How cool will it be to be able to bless a pastor and say, hey, we've got a venue in Hawaii. Why don't you take your wife and go away for a week? Or we've got a place in Disneyland. Why don't you take your wife and kids and go to Disneyland for a week, and it won't cost you anything? How cool would it be someday if we kind of become the Airbnb for pastor vacations? Because somebody in this room may own a really nice vacation home in Scottsdale, Arizona, and might say, man, we'll make that available to a pastor for a couple weeks out of the year. So that's a little bit about what we're going to be doing. And we're really excited. You guys, our heart obviously is if we can make an impact in the life of a pastor, we know that we can make an impact in the life of a church. And we know that if we can make an impact in the life of a church, we can make an impact in the life of a community. And pastors desperately need people to pour into them. So I'm really excited how Radius is going to come alongside. You guys will obviously stay up to date on all of this process as it comes. So this morning, friends, would you stand with me as I kind of wrap up our time together?